Hi, my name is Catherine Harafis, and I'm an occupational therapist who works with stroke survivors, particularly young stroke survivors, and the rehabilitation process. This presentation, Your Employee Has Had a Stroke, Now What?, has been developed for you, the employer of a stroke survivor employee. It has been developed to help educate you, help support you, and help you facilitate a successful return to work for your employee. What is a stroke? Well, the stroke is like a brain attack. It is a result of a disturbance of blood supply to the brain. Usually, the damage is to the one side of the brain, with the physical effects seen on the other opposite side of the body. Now, the number of people having a stroke between the ages of 20 and 64 has increased by 25% worldwide from 1990 to 2010. And it's evident that this is a group that is in need and growing. At least 20% of all strokes in the UK and the US and Australia are of working age. And given this trend of stroke becoming more and more common in working age individuals, we must look focused and support and facilitate a successful return to work for these members of society. Now let's look at it a little more simply. A stroke, imagine your brain is like a forest and full of tree branches and leaves, and this little monkey here is a message. The messages that go from one area of the brain to the other, and they travel via the branches of the forest. However, one day, there's a big forest fire, and the branches and the leaves of one particular area of this forest are burnt down. This results in a gap, an inability for the message, the little monkey, to travel from one area to the other. But we are fortunate because our brains have plasticity, and depending on the severity of the stroke, our brain has the ability to reroute these little messages, these little monkeys, to other areas of the brain. And this is done through very specialized intervention and rehabilitation techniques. Now, the effects of stroke vary depending on the intensity of the damage and the area of the brain affected. There are visible difficulties. For example, difficulties with walking. You may see someone, a stroke survivor, with a cane. Difficulties with vision, giving them an inability to judge distances and see certain parts of their visual field. They could have speech issues, which means difficulty with either articulation, expression, word finding, and of course, decreased functional use of the affected arm and leg. Now, there are also invisible difficulties as well, and these are of the hardest and the ones that most affect the successful return to work. There are cognitive challenges, which are unseen, challenges in executive function, attention and concentration, processing speed, memory, and literacy. There are also psychological and emotional changes that occur. Depression, emotional liability, mood disturbances, all can be part of these challenges. And fatigue is, I think, the most difficult of the invisible symptoms, invisible effects to manage. And it permeates any kind of stroke, anything you do as a stroke survivor afterwards. But it can be managed with proper support. And always remember, even though these are some scary impacts of the stroke, the brain has the ability with proper rehabilitation to overcome a lot of these difficulties. But it does take time. And young stroke survivors want to return to work, but you, their employer, must be a part of the return to work team in order for this to be a success. So what can you do for your stroke survivor employee? Proper support and timing are key factors in return to work after stroke. It's important to not rush the stroke survivor to return to work, and to make sure that the support is in place in the accommodations before they return, so there is more of a successful return to work experience. It is a complex process and it involves education, expectations, negotiations, and accommodations. But good communication is key, and it helps to alleviate fears, which also serve as barriers. There are many things you can do, starting with keeping in touch with your employee from the onset of the stroke. It's important not to bombard them with communication, especially initially when they're just trying to overcome what has happened to them. You don't want to make them feel pressure to return to work before they're ready to. However, it's important for them to know that you do have them in your mind, and you do have a goal for them to return to work if they choose to have that as a goal. You want to make sure you listen to them and don't make assumptions. It is important to listen and meet with a stroke survivor before they return to work to clarify the expectations, assumptions, and assistance that they may need upon returning to work. It's important to respect their privacy and not disclose any of their information to their coworkers. However, at the same time, it is important to encourage the disclosure of stroke-related issues and the needs to the coworkers so that there are no misunderstandings. Society does not understand the invisible consequences of stroke and how the adjustments may seem unfair to some coworkers if they're not explained properly to them. We want to make sure that it is a positive environment that they're returning to and not one filled with resentment. Now, what is a phased return? And this is something that is really becoming best practice for return to work for stroke survivors. And it's basically as opposed to returning to on a full-time basis, it's a kind of slow, gradual return to work. They could initially work from home and start few hours on alternate days and slowly and gradually building up to full-time as their endurance increases. And this is a wonderful way to explore the adjustments that are needed to be made by both parties and problem solving different issues that may come up, which is not something that you might have thought about before them actually entering work. So testing the waters and identifying problems and working on solutions will really assist with a successful return to work. Now, accommodations are by law something that they are entitled to, and they can a small adjustment or accommodation can really make a difference to allow successful management of the work situation. If someone has lost hand function because of the brain damage, a one-handed keyboard might increase their productivity and speed in doing things with one hand. Now, the thing that really worries employers the most, according to research, are the non-visible cognitive issues. And here are some small tips. For example, you want to keep verbal or written instructions clear and concise, and try not to overload them with too much information at once. And this is helpful for those that have processing and attention difficulties. Written instructions or a reference guide could be useful for someone who has short-term memory problems. Reducing distractions and allowing for regular breaks can often help to improve concentration. Now, these breaks that we're referring to, really, you should allow your employee to regulate their rest break so they know how to best manage their stroke challenges. And if possible, provide a rest room for them, a quiet room to manage their physical and mental fatigue. It could be a small, private, quiet space where the stroke survivor can have complete breaks from work, which really helps to manage this mental fatigue. But keep in mind, it's really important to keep the lines of communication open and for you to be flexible. It's important to kind of set up structured meetings to monitor the return to work process and problem solve effectively. And maybe even assign a mentor at work to support and help negotiate this reorientation. But you really do need to be flexible. There are doctor's appointments that they must keep, and it really needs to support them to keep these. And also acknowledge and allow the stroke survivor to use a different means than is expected to achieve an equivalent result. If this all seems very overwhelming to you, don't feel overwhelmed, because you don't have to do this alone. Seek out help. An occupational therapist is a trained rehabilitation professional who can be your ally in coordinating successful return to work. The OT who has worked with your employee can provide important medical and occupational health information, tell you about their skill level and what they can do and not do to help you adjust maybe job requirements initially, to really focus on the things that your employee can do while working on the things that they can't do just quite yet. And encourage your employee, if they haven't already accessed occupational therapy services, to access them and request a workplace assessment to be done and a job analysis. This will allow the OT to identify possible accommodations and solutions that are best possible for you, and a return to work plan is specifically designed for you and your employee. But always remember, for a successful return to work, you must listen, facilitate, accommodate, and support your stroke survivor employee. Along with this presentation, you will see that the employer's guide for supporting their stroke survivor employee return to work, which reinforces the things in this presentation and also provides some web pages and websites that you can visit for additional information and for additional support as an employer of a stroke survivor. These individuals want to resume being productive members of society. Their families may depend on them for financial stability, and they need to find their self-efficacy and self-esteem again. We can support you to support them to return to work and be really productive and healthy members of society again. Always remember, you're not alone and you can seek out help. I hope this was helpful to you, and I hope that you seek out more information and assistance to have a successful return to work for you and your employee. Thank you.